and take it away. Go ahead, Phil.
Thank you, Pi. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me and Tom. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. A little bit about me, and this is all you'll see about me. I've been kicking around the Boston area now since 1979. Probably will always be a Ferner with my 9 call, but I like having a call sign that reflects where I'm from as opposed to where I happen to be. I have been in Tom's shoes, having served 5 terms as section manager, and I have to say Tom probably has the more difficult job, speaking from experience. I've also served in an affiliated club coordinator role. I really enjoy interacting with the various radio clubs and talking to the club presidents and helping to strengthen clubs. And we actually have our ACC on this evening, Bruce Blaine, K1BG. Hi, Bruce. The other thing that I'm involved with is the Boxborough / Ham Exposition / New England Division Convention. I serve as program chair. And we are going to try to have an in-person convention again this year, hopefully, if we don't have any big outbreaks. That will be the September, I think, 10th, 11th timeframe that weekend. And pretty soon I'll be putting out feelers to people who want to give presentations at that convention. So you got 2 completely different animals here this evening, in Tom and me. A lot of folks don't have a good understanding of what the director, vice director role is versus that of the section manager. Directors are responsible for setting national policy. They sit on the board, they vote on issues involving money. Tom just gets to spend it. Unfortunately, the board of directors has a tendency to micromanage. I used to, well, let's put it this way. I see that now very, very much on the mailing lists. But we do have a very dedicated, competent staff in Newington. I'll get into that in some more slides coming up. I'm sort of in a hot standby role. If something were to happen to Fred Hopengarden, K1VR, I would immediately assume the duties of the director. Otherwise, I am a non-voting member of the board. And as such, I'm privy to all the information that a director is privy to. My term is a 3-year term as opposed to Tom's, which is 2. I won't go into a lot of what the section manager does because I think Tom has a slide on that, but suffice to say, if I listed all of the bullet items, it would go on for a couple of pages. So Tom definitely has more responsibility and less pay than me. I'm joking, of course, neither one of us get paid. I love this slide because of the colors. It's, of course, a boring mission statement, but the colors match up nicely to the logo, so I like to include this. And I think Tom's going to go over the mission statement as well. When people think of the ARRL, unfortunately, they think of just QST magazine. And of course, it's much, much more. Not only is it just a magazine, it's 4 magazines, in fact. QEX, National Contest Journal, QST, and the newest magazine of the family, On the Air, which is making a big hit. I have a slide on that coming up. When you join the league, a lot of your money goes toward regulatory advocacy. I have a few more slides on that, but we have a very competent legal counsel, K3ZJ, David Sidal in Washington, D.C. And he's been very active, actually, the past 6 months on some notices of proposed rulemaking and other actions, which I'll cover. If you're at all an operator on the air, you've heard of Logbook of the World. A very good project. I know its front end, its interface probably needs some work. And I know that project is in the works to make LOTW easier to use and more friendly. The League, of course, has lots of interesting items in its bookstore. I would encourage you to visit that page if you haven't recently. Of course, no nonprofit organization can get by alone just on dues. So it's important that we support the ARRL, our organization, by buying its products. The League, of course, sponsors numerous popular contests, sweepstakes, DX contest, straight key night, one of my favorites. And it's also known for its awards, of course, DXCC, WAC, WAS. I'm a condo dweller living on the top floor of a high rise, but over the years I have obtained DXCC and WAC and WAS. Someday I'd like to get on the air again and work on some of these other awards. The League has a fantastic technical information service. If you get stuck with some technical issue, all you have to do really is pick the phone up and call headquarters, and someone there will either have the answer to your question or they will steer you in the right direction. The League is one of 8, I think it's 8 volunteer examiner coordinators organizing volunteer exams. It's by far the largest of the VECs. I'll have a slide coming up in a moment on that. Of course, W1AW, the famous headquarters station, which has been around for a long, long time. And the field organization, of which Tom heads up here locally in Eastern Massachusetts. The League owns 2 buildings outright in Newington, the famous W1AW building and the headquarters building, which is located directly behind it. And if you've never been down to Newington, if you've never made the pilgrimage to Mecca, I strongly encourage you. Once COVID is over, they'll roll out the red carpet for you. But in the meantime, they do have some great virtual tours of W1AW that you can see. Tom's Club actually had a live tour of W1AW by the station manager, Joe, in NJ1P. Is that right, Tom? I think that's his call.
Yeah, I forget the call, but let me just add.
Sure.
Joe did a wonderful job, and I think K1USN, if they would like, I'm sure he would do it for this club too, if you haven't. It was a wonderful tour of W1AW, so I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it was superb. And even if he isn't willing or can't do a live virtual tour, there's a great recording online. The League also leases a large warehouse from which they ship publications and store them. Apparently there's an effort underway by some of the board to explore the possibility of buying the building outright and leasing sections of it that they would not need. So that debate's raging on right now. I don't know how it's going to go. Headquarters has approximately 94 part-time, oh, I guess I'm talking too loud, part-time and full-time employees, broken down by function and department. I won't read them all here, but the newest of the bunch is the lifelong learning program. I have a slide coming up on that. That's kind of an exciting deal. And of course, the laboratory, got some very smart people down there researching new products and other things. The big news lately, if you haven't heard, you've probably not been following any ham radio news, but we have a new Chief Executive Officer, David Minster, in A2AA. He's a very active amateur. I think he's going to shake things up in the culture down there. He wants to bring ARRL from the print age to the electronic/digital age. And he's got some great ideas on how to do it. Within the last 6 months, the league has also hired a new emergency management director, Paul Gilbert, KE5ZW. Here's the bio description for David Minster. I like the fact that he's a very well-rounded amateur. He's dabbled in a little bit of everything from digital communications, satellites. He's written ham radio software. And he's a telegraph collector too, a key collector. That's kind of cool. Paul Gilbert's bio, very experienced in public service and public safety, and a former section manager to boot. Radio officer for the Texas State Guard. Interesting. I just threw this in. That's kind of out of sequence here, but as you may know, Field Day will continue in a COVID mode this year. The new twist that they're introducing is a power limit on Class C and Class D home stations, 150 watts PEP. I guess people didn't want to hear California kilowatts operating Field Day from home. So I think this is a good move. And of course, the full rules are available online. I like the fact that there were a record 10,213 entries received last year. So COVID really didn't put much of a dent in Field Day, at least in terms of the logs turned in, contacts. Lifelong learning, new program started by Chris Bickle, K1B, I want to say BIC. I thought I had another bullet item on him, but I don't think that I do. What's cool about this program is they are introducing content for people of all levels of expertise in ham radio, not just newcomers, but us old timers as well. Stand something to learn from this program. Some of it's online already. More of it's coming in the future. What's new lately in publications? We probably don't all buy new radio amateur handbooks every year, but in 2021, you can either buy the traditional book or a 6-volume set, which is kind of cool. And the antenna book set, or the antenna book rather, comes traditionally one book, or you can buy it as a boxed set as well. I think this is a new publication, Amateur Radio Contesting for Beginners. Anyone have this book?
Well, I think we're going to need to buy that for our club library.
Yeah, for SST.
Right.
Arduino, I think this book, well, there are a number of books dealing with Arduino. One of them is relatively new. This one is pretty new. Low bands ham radio for the new 2200 and 630 meter bands. And here's just a snapshot of what the bookstore page looks like. I like to put this up here to show all of the wide variety of products that they sell, not just books, but maps, kits, pins, patches, all manner of paraphernalia. I know amateurs are attracted to shiny objects like crows, so here's the place to go. I mentioned at the beginning, the league has a new, relatively new publication called On the Air. It debuted last year. And it's been a big hit, not only among just beginners, but a lot of folks. In fact, it was popular enough that over 20,000 members decided that they would choose it as their primary print publication. Now, many of you may not know this, but you can see all 4 magazines online electronically, but you can only have one mailed to you. You can have more mailed, but you have to pay a substantial amount of money. And I've gotten feedback from people saying, well, I want to get 2 of the magazines by mail. Why can't I do that for a reasonable price? So I'm going to try to work on that, find out what the deal is there. On the Air also has a monthly podcast that accompanies it. If you've never heard it before, I would encourage you to check out an online issue. The Volunteer Monitor program is certainly new. It replaces the old Amateur Auxiliary / Official Observer program. Soft rollout early last year, not too much fanfare. And what's interesting, it's headed by former FCC employee Riley Hollingsworth. Many of you may know that name, that call, K4ZDH. If you ever received a phone call from Riley Hollingsworth, you probably lived in terror that you had done something wrong. Although I hear he's a very nice guy. I haven't had the pleasure of speaking with him yet. He's ably assisted at headquarters by Dan Henderson, N1ND. Both of them can field your questions, comments, reports. 165 active volunteer monitors nationwide. They're spaced out geographically across the country. I forget how many regions, how many VMs are assigned per region, but it's roughly spaced out equally. And I'm told they send out a fair number of good guy reports, which I was glad to hear about, not just offenders. Back when Riley reported on this in April of last year, he had 30 open cases, 5 of which were good operator cases. I'm not quite sure why they would remain open. Maybe there was more to it than just sending an email saying, you did a great job. But as the article says, he's reaching out to people both by US mail, telephone calls, emails, and 2,300 hours of monitoring on HF at that point. Here's the latest VM report for February that came out this month. And I won't read it all, but the bullet item, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th bullet item is interesting. They actually did reach out to an organization in Odessa, Texas, that was using amateur radio illegally, using our 2-meter frequencies. So that tells me that it's not just fluff. He probably said to them, my next phone call is going to be to the FCC. So he acts as a stopgap between amateurs and the FCC and escalates cases as needed. Continuing on with new things. The VEC program is not new, but COVID certainly made us have to adapt and do things differently. I don't, Pi, did K1USN close down its the Braintree sessions completely, or did they continue with social distancing?
No, well, we closed down for about 6 months, and then when it restarted, it's in a different location, but still in Braintree. And yeah, they're doing the socially distanced thing, and every session is filling up. You know, they have like 3 sessions on a Saturday once a month, and they all fill up well before the session starts.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, I know that many teams shut down entirely. Some teams employed some rather unique things. The drive-in testing. I know the Newport County Club, or no, I'm sorry, it was the Blackstone Valley Amateur Radio Club in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, conducted drive-in testing, as did some other clubs. I think one in Eastern New York even made a instructive video on how to do that. So that was interesting. And I got involved in mid-April of last year with the New England Amateur Radio group out of Natick to do online remote Zoom testing. And that's been a blast. We typically do anywhere from 3 to 5 sessions a week. We don't do high volumes, but we do take our time, and over the course of an hour or 2, we will test 2 to 3, maybe sometimes even 4 or 5 people. And would have to say that the number of opportunities for people to test really was not significantly impacted due to the ability of Zoom to remotely test people. The other VECs, W5YI, Greater Los Angeles Amateur Radio Group, they too took to remote testing in a big way. But hopefully pretty soon we'll see many more face-to-face testing opportunities coming up. And this is just a screenshot of the web tool that we use online to both the VEs and the examiners to log in to do an exam. And this is just a slide on New England Amateur Radio. They were one of the teams that pioneered the use of remote testing, headed by Bob Finney, K1USN, who's an incredible gentleman. He runs a makerspace ham radio / astronomy setup in Natick, Mass. Just a fact sheet about the ARRL VEC. As I mentioned, it's the largest of the VECs. Regulatory advocacy. I've got a number of slides here. Been a number of legal things pop up in the last 6-8 months. Probably the most well-known was the NPRM docket 20-270, where the FCC wanted to charge us $50 for a 10-year license. That seemed like a rather excessive amount of money. I've got a slide coming up on that next. The report and order in WT docket 19-358 dealt with the microwave band 3.3 to 3.5 gigahertz. It looked like the FCC was going to kick us off of that band completely, but the league did file a petition for reconsideration. I'll get to that in a moment. Yeah, well, let's get to that microwave thing right here. It's interesting. The ARRL basically said to the FCC, why are you changing the way you do business? In other words, the FCC said, you are to cease on a date consistent with the first possible grant of flexible use authorizations to new users. What that's translated to is, we want you off the band now. And the league filed a reconsideration petition saying, why should we be required to depart as secondary users now, when in the past you've allowed users to continue subject to non-interference. The ARRL was challenged, their petition was challenged by the CTIA, a powerful lobbying group representing the wireless communications industry. They filed opposition to that petition. The FCC, fortunately, agreed with the ARRL. And they are allowing secondary use of portions of the band to continue up until the point where primary users need that spectrum. So that was a bit of a victory on the part of the ARRL. And I think we should all be rather proud of that fact. We don't have the lobbying power of the NRA or the NAACP or the AARP, but for many things, the FCC does listen to us. They listened to us on the $50 fee proposal. The league mounted an extensive public relations campaign. They got over 3,800 comments solicited from members. I personally got involved with that as well. I visited over a dozen radio clubs with a presentation showing just how easy it was to get on the FCC website and file comments. So I'd like to think that I helped out there. But certainly based on those comments and the comments that the ARRL filed, the FCC came back and said, yeah, maybe we are asking for too much money, given what we really do in terms of processing an amateur radio license. So they scaled that back. It's going to be $35 for a 10-year license. It doesn't affect you if you have a address change, which is good. Folks saw that published in the Federal Register back on March 19th and concluded, oh, it becomes effective on April 19, as most things do 1 month after filing. But this is not the case here. It's still not clear when we'll have to pay $35. Probably in the summer. That's the best guess. Back in January, the FCC said they wanted input on expanding the number of volunteer examiner coordinators. The ARRL took a position contrary to that, saying, we don't need any more VECs. We're doing just fine, thank you. Amateur examination opportunities and numbers have been strong throughout the COVID period. So we'll see what happens with that. And the FCC just came out without asking anybody and said, we're going to start requiring electronic filing for all of our licensees that use our ULS licensing system. I guess the saving grace is that if you have no internet access or you have no electronic mail, you can petition the FCC to have an alternative to that. Sorry for the QR Mary there. You can probably hear her stronger than me. Applications must contain email addresses on June 29. Oh, ignore that. That's a different radio club. Tom, I think this concludes. I have one more slide, but I want to introduce it after your talk. So Tom, unless somebody has a real quick question they want to get in here, Tom, take it away.
Let me, oops, I was going ahead too fast. Let me go back one. Well, actually, the slide you saw was the opening picture. I kind of like that picture. A lot of this will complement what Phil has said. So I will do my best not to repeat things. But the big difference between what Phil has said as an vice director and what I'm about to tell you is, first of all, Phil is way more important in terms of the ARRL policy. He and the director are the people who determine the policy, whereas your section manager is more like a recruiter. So I will try to focus a little bit as I talk about sometimes the same topic, but on those differences. So director and vice director do the policy work for the ARRL. They're the ones you will contact if you think the magazine is not arriving on time and the dues are too high and you want them to put a little pressure perhaps on headquarters, although I don't actually recommend that for smaller issues because headquarters is excellent. They have great people. But if it's ARRL policy, then they're the ones to contact. And as he said, there is some concern. Sometimes they micromanage. So not always asking, don't ask them to micromanage. But issues like what the dues should be is definitely within their realm. So here's a little more about the ARRL mission statement. And I kind of like it because it basically says, in one simple sentence, really what the ARRL is about. It's to advance the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. And I think that pretty much covers pretty well in that one statement, succinctly and nicely captures the essence of what the league does. Because almost anything can be put in one of those boxes. It may be pertaining to the art of amateur radio, the science and the technology, or just the plain fun. So I like to suggest that if someone who does not know anything about ham radio asks you what ARRL does, this is a good starting point. And I think it's very nice that it's simple, very straightforward. Okay. We move to the next slide. A little bit more nuts and bolts. You may know that, or you may not, but there are 15 divisions nationally separated. We are in the New England division, and there are 71 sections. What's interesting is the New England division consists of 6 states, but 7 sections. And there they are. And that's because Massachusetts is a little bit larger population-wise than the other states. So we have an Eastern Mass and a Western Mass. And if you're not sure which section you're in, it's determined by the county you live in. Bruce Blaine, who is on the call today, is very interesting. He is the affiliated club coordinator for Eastern Massachusetts. And by agreement, though, he lives about a mile from the border of Eastern Massachusetts. But I have an agreement with the Western Massachusetts section manager to have him serve on my staff as the affiliated club coordinator, even though he's 1 mile outside the section.
It's technically worse than that, Tom. I live in a little peninsula of land, and so I tell people that I live in Western Massachusetts, east of Eastern Massachusetts, which really confuses them.
Yes. I'll have more to say about Bruce before we're done, by the way, because I think he is an outstanding affiliated club coordinator, and well worth establishing a dialogue with Bruce. He can provide a lot of help to clubs.
I think he deserves a raise, Tom.
We all do. I heard we might get double or nothing next year. In either case, it would be the same thing, I think. 00 is still 0. Okay, just a joke. We love our job. We love volunteering and serving this hobby. So the New England Division Director, you know, is Fred Hopengarden, K1VR. And you certainly know Phil Temples by now, I hope, K9HI. The interesting thing is, and this is, I'll quickly mention this, that they do serve 3-year terms, and there will be an election this year. So sometime during the summer, the ARRL will open it up for nominations. And as I said, the main thing is they set the policy, which is a very big thing. And the section manager, myself in this case, is a 2-year position, also elected. And so I just started my 4th term on January 1st this year. So the next election will occur, not this year, but next year in the summertime, I believe. I have a staff of 10 people. There's the section emergency communicator, Rob Macedo, who many of you may know if you do any MCOM work, the section traffic manager, Marsha Ford, who is also one of the leading people nationally when it comes to issues like traffic handling. And just a quick shout out to the Marsha and the traffic networks. Every day from about 10 a.m. till 10 p.m. or so here in Eastern Mass, and literally nationwide, there is a cadence of national, local, regional networks. They start in the morning, they go through the afternoon, early evening, and late evening. And it's a beautiful thing in my mind to see that daily cadence of these networks. Assistant section managers, I have 5. The affiliated club coordinator that I mentioned. The technical coordinator is Dan, W1DAN. He's also president of Wellesley Club. And if you have any technical issue, Dan has a team of very talented people. He has solved and assisted people with various issues, questions about pay pause, questions about interference. He is available for consultation. And in addition to what Phil mentioned, the TIS group down at headquarters, you can call them too. They are usually the lab folks. But we have a local group here headed by Dan, W1DAN. Feel free to reach out for him for help. The state government liaison, who a year ago really helped us. If you're aware of the hands-free bill, we rallied people across the state, both sections, to contact the legislator to make sure our ability to operate mobile radio would not be affected. And there is an exemption for ham radio operation. And then currently there's public information or coordinators and a system youth coordinator, a section youth coordinator, I mean, and those positions are open. You can look at more information there at those websites. So basically, section managers are about volunteers. And there are many, many volunteer positions available if you're interested in IMCOM, traffic handling, publicity, following legislation. There are many, so if you would like to become involved, contact me. You can also see the information on the ARRL website on what each of these positions involve, and I'd be happy to point you to a volunteer position. And Phil covered this, that you now get 4 magazines instead of just 1 with your membership, which I think is wonderful. And I like the NCJ Contest Journal. As I say, don't contest without it. You choose one and you can read the others online. Phil mentioned lifelong learning. It is fairly new, but already has an impressive set of webinars, and they are always adding to it. And I think this is going to be a great repository of future information. I am just trying to highlight a couple of the key things about what's in what I call the ARRL universe. And these are some of my highlights.
Tom?
Yes.
Just back to your last slide for a second.
Yes.
I wanted to mention that several local amateurs have registered on the league's website to give talks. Rob Macedo, who a lot of people know, KD1CY, he's done one on Skywarn. And Steve Schwarm, W3EVE, talked about the Boston Marathon communications during the bombing in 2014. And there's a third local amateur who I'm spacing out at the moment. So those of you who have expertise, like Pi, for example, on CW ops, you may want to consider registering to give a presentation.
Good point. And I fully agree with what Phil just said. So this is a brand new activity from headquarters, and I think it's really going to produce a lot of good content. So check those folks out. You do have to register on the ARRL website. So you do have to be an ARRL member, I believe, to access the content, but it's well worth it to do that and see what's available. Okay, this is my personal favorite. This just absolutely amazes me all the time, how much information you can glean from every QST issue since day one. You can see that the articles, I guess, go back as far as 1915. All the recent magazines for the last decade or so are fully there to peruse, and you can search for anything on antennas. You want to find out the history of a G5RV, or you want to find out who was Beveridge and the Beveridge antenna. It's pretty much been covered in QST for more than 100 years. And this is a free service to ARRL members. And I never get tired of when I want to think about what kind of antenna I might want to build for 40 meters to go look up some past articles on the topic. So this alone to me is well worth the membership. I love Logbook of the World, of course. Phil mentioned it briefly, but sometimes I hear people are a little intimidated by the process. It's really not that hard if you follow it carefully, step by step. As I say, under getting started, what you do first is you get the TQSL software, which you can get from the ARRL, and you install that. You then request a certificate, and that's all part of the process. After you install it, I think you can do that online. And then I think the first time it shows up as a postcard with your password. Anyway, just follow that, and it's wonderful. For example, just a few weeks ago, there was the ARRL DX contest, and at the end of the contest, I uploaded my log, and I already had confirmations from a large number of the contacts I made in countries and so forth within 24 hours. So it's really a tremendous thing. Phil told you that they are looking at improvements. It's not without issues, but boy, it is beautiful. So almost instantly you get your QSL cards, as long as the other guy loads up his log too. So there you go. I love LOTW. And if you're not on it, I recommend it. One more thing that I think really should be highlighted. Phil touched a little bit on, the work ARRL does with the FCC. Well, more than a little. He discussed all those proposed rule makings and things that affect the hobby. ARRL is constantly watching for this, constantly watching what happens in Washington with the FCC, with these other organizations like the wireless people who want frequencies and so forth. Sometimes frequencies we already use. And it's more than just Washington, though. ARRL is also watching what happens internationally. I don't know if people remember a few years ago, there was a proposal in France to take away quite a bit of the 2-meter radio spectrum in Europe. And, if something like that got through the international organizations, it may well affect us here. So it's not the ARRL per se alone, but through an organization called the International Amateur Radio Union, which is really a worldwide organization of national societies. They were on top of that from day one, and they were watching as that proposal was working its way. It could have wound up at the next International Radio Conference, which would then determine the spectrum allocations, and what they decide will ultimately affect us. And so that had a happy ending for ham radio, because the IARU and others were able to effectively stop that proposal. Now, IARU represents national societies all around the world. So not only is ARRL a member of it, it is also the secretariat of it. Many of you remember Dave Sumner, for many years the CEO, and before that general manager of the ARRL, and he is currently the IARU secretary. And Dave is a really effective person in that role. He is very capable. He knows how to work internationally. They often spend their time at the International Telecommunication Union, which is in Geneva, Switzerland, where all of these spectrum decisions are ultimately made every few years. I'll tell you a quick story. One time I was in Geneva working for a company. I was not involved in radio issues. I was involved in some internet issues. And I took the tram one morning from my hotel to go to the ITU building, and who walks on but Dave Sumner. And so we had a little chat, and I found out Dave was there because there was a possibility of us getting a new spectrum. And they were there at the radio conference. And this was back, I think, around 2011 or 2012. And the ultimate result of that was the new amateur radio band was approved. So ARRL has many people in IARU, but so do RSGB, the German, French, all the other national societies all around the world. So this is something that you don't see a lot, but it is so important to the future spectrum that we enjoy. And so I would like to see a little bit more of this actually publicized by the ARRL, but you can go to those two websites that are at the bottom there and you can read about the current issues. There is another international radio conference coming up in the next year or two, and they're already working on the proposals for that, and they will be keeping an eye on anything detrimental to our hobby. So with that, I have one more slide, which I would like to present to the club to ask for your feedback on and maybe help. But before I do that, Phil had asked me to turn it back to him briefly, and then Phil will turn it back to me for one last slide, and then we'll have questions and answers. Okay, so take it away, Phil. And I stop screen sharing, okay? Phil, done.
All right, we're going to do a fun little quiz. I don't know how many of you have seen this. If you have, let the others chime in first. Which of the following statements, which I'm going to reveal, are not true about Hiram Percy Maxim? The first one's kind of a dead giveaway because, oops, where's my cursor? You probably all know that he was one of the founders of the ARRL. So A is not the correct answer. It is true. Bravo, he invented the first commercially successful firearm silencer. Charlie, he is buried in West Hartford, Connecticut. Delta, he experimented with powered flight. Echo, he developed mufflers for internal combustion engines. Oops. So shout out Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, etc. Which one you think is not true? And unmute yourselves first, of course.
Charlie.
Charlie, okay. Anyone else?
Charlie.
Charlie again. Anyone else? Nobody wants to be wrong. Anyone else?
Echo. I'll take a shot at it.
Okay. Pardon me? I heard the echo, but what was the last one?
Delta.
Delta, okay.
Echo.
Echo again. So we got two Charlies, two Echoes, a Delta. Anyone else?
Delta.
Another Delta. Okay. The correct non-answer, the false answer, is Charlie. He is not buried in West Hartford. He's actually buried in Maryland. Most people answer with D, Delta, but he did experiment with powered flight, believe it or not. All right, Tom, back to you.
Before I go to the last slide, I would like to mention that, and this is something that I have been discussing with people on my staff. You know, I showed earlier that I have 10 people immediately reporting to me as the section manager. There is a little known award available from the ARRL for use by section managers to recognize people who have done some rather amazing or interesting or should be recognized for some possible service they have done for the hobby. And I have been in some sections where occasionally I see this award. It's called the Certificate of Merit. Let me show you what it looks like. It's kind of a nice certificate. And recently here in Eastern Massachusetts, it was brought to my attention that we really should make this a regular activity here also in Eastern Mass. You know, oftentimes we'll write a story about something and put it up on the EMA website, or we'll put it up on the division website, or we'll just put it in the section news or something like that. But I think if someone has really done something of interest or of note, it would be really wonderful. So I'm reaching out to the club K1USN maybe to help me with this. First of all, in my mind, K1USN is an amazing club. You folks are doing some great things. Unfortunately, as I understand this certificate, it is not intended for clubs per se, but for individuals. So I'm sure that within the ranks of the club, there are some individuals that have done some wonderful things. The SST comes to mind, for one thing. You have so many activities. So what I would like to ask the members is, would you consider writing to me offline, nominating somebody? Now, they don't have to just be in the K1USN club. If you know someone elsewhere in the section that you think is doing something amazing, I would appreciate it if you would contact me. Give me a very short paragraph on why, and I'll put those people into the group, and I'll have my staff look at it, and from that we can maybe select some folks. So I'd like to kind of launch this with you guys first, and then if this seems to work very well, we'll start publicizing this maybe section-wide. If not, you're going to have to rely on me to pick and choose who gets them, and I'd really like to get broader input. So you could do me a wonderful favor if you would take a few minutes after tonight, during the week, give this some thought, and tell me who deserves specific recognition, and I'll start this ball moving. I have already 2 people that have been recommended from my staff that I am considering, but I would like to, expand this. So immediately what comes to mind is I would love to list every single member of the club. And I hear that many of you have been involved in several other things, such as the SST. What I probably really need, though, is, I could experiment with it and list 15 people or something if there's a group activity. But tell me who you think really has been showing leadership and showing things. I'd like to hear any feedback about that. And so with that, so that's my request to the club. And I want to thank you for allowing Phil and myself to speak to you tonight. As the section manager, you want to contact me if you want to get involved in volunteering throughout the section, in various activities. And you want to contact Phil, if you have any policy issues that you would like to get information on or to thing. And I'd like to recognize one more person here before we go to questions. And that's Bruce Blaine, who has been very kindly, sitting here. He's my affiliated club coordinator. Bruce has, we joked a little bit about, he's just over the line in Western Mass, and he's apparently, he's probably apparently east of Eastern Mass where he lives. Isn't that confusing? The way I like to say it, though, if you want to know whether you're in Western or Eastern Mass, just follow Route 495 all the way from Gloucester to Cape Cod. And if you're inside 495, you're in Eastern Mass. If you're outside it, you're probably in Western Mass. So, Bruce, if you have a moment, maybe I could just have Bruce just take a moment and talk about his role as the affiliated club coordinator and what he can do to support clubs if Bruce is willing to do that. So with that, I think Phil and I are ready for questions. But I'd love to give Bruce a minute or two as well. Would that be all right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I had a nice chat with Bruce the other day. So go ahead, Bruce.
Thank you, Tom. Well, I'll tell you, I didn't expect to talk, so I really haven't prepared anything. I came more as an observer, but I view my role as affiliated club coordinator, particularly at this time, to help revitalize and re-energize a lot of the amateur radio clubs in Eastern Massachusetts. K1USN is doing very well. And in fact, what's interesting, when I became affiliated club coordinator, K1USN was one of the very first clubs that I went and visited, and I had breakfast with everyone and visited your Radio Shack down in Braintree one Saturday morning, and I wanted to find out what was making you successful and why you were successful. Because those kinds of activities and those kinds of things need to be shared and duplicated at other clubs. I'm a believer that it's easy to stop one person, but it's hard to stop 100 people. And the successful clubs need to really share the things that they're doing with the other clubs, particularly these days, because society has changed so much. The things that worked 40, 50 years ago don't work today. We need a new set of solutions and a new set of ideas. So I view that as being really my role. Now, COVID has kind of changed that a little bit as well, but nevertheless, those are the things that I'm focusing on. So, and I have very few suggestions or recommendations to make to K1USN. I hope you keep doing the things that you're doing because you do them very well.
Okay, so Pi, I think we're done, unless people would like to go into questions.
Yeah, I wanted to steal this for just a minute here and make a couple of observations, and then, yeah, let's open it up for questions. It was funny when Tom mentioned about Dave Sumner, K1ZZ. I think I told Tom that I had one of his early Tom's QSL cards from when we were first licensed in 1962. And I also have one from Dave when Dave was KN1ZND. And one of my visits down to the league, I gave him the KN1ZND QSL card. So he was also licensed in 1962. So I guess it was a good year or whatever, you know. But gee, there were so many things on there. One of the things, and I got to tell everybody that we're going to be having our director, K1VR, the guy who has the dyslexic call from mine. He's going to be here in another month. So maybe if you don't get your questions answered to your satisfaction today, you can really lean on Fred later on. But the whole thing about Logbook of the World, you know, when you talked about Logbook of the World, Tom, I've been a big advocate from the very beginning, but it's not user friendly, and I've had those discussions with so many people at the league over the years that I'm not going to beat a dead horse. But you said something that triggered one of the conversations that I've had multiple times with the league, and it's gone nowhere. You said during the ARRL DX contest, after the contest, you uploaded your log. This is what I do after every contest, ARRL or CQ contest or whatever. I upload my log, and yeah, you get, you know, maybe half of them almost immediately are confirmed. My thing about growing Logbook of the World, and improving the whole thing about wanting to have participation, if we do all the log checking that they do when we upload a log to the league after a contest, and particularly an ARRL contest, let's just start with that. Why don't they automatically upload everybody's contest log into Logbook of the World? And I'm talking about people that aren't even registered, but as an incentive to get them to register. And all you would have to do on the page for uploading your log is, if you don't want it to happen, you just click the box that says don't do this. In other words, all of a sudden the database is going to grow much bigger, and you probably would get some people, particularly people overseas, who have even more trouble going through the process. So anyhow, that's the I'll talk more with Fred about that later on. I'll detail an email with some other thoughts on that. But let's open it up for questions. Anybody that has any questions for either Phil or Tom, go right ahead.
Go ahead, Henry.
Okay, my question is, why would the FCC say that more VEC coordinators are needed? Why would they suddenly do that out of the blue? What's their reasoning? Does anyone have any idea?
My best guess is that some group wishes to be a VEC, some small group somewhere, and they've petitioned the FCC. I've not read the original NPRM, so I don't know where this is coming from. But certainly the existing VECs, none of them, I think, are in favor of it. I'll try to find out, Hank. That's a good question.
All right, thank you.
Phil? As
Yes,
Mike,
sir.
WA1MB, regarding the license renewals, would the FCC delegate to ARRL the aggregating the renewal fees, or are they going to do it directly? I'm just looking at ways of trying to expedite renewals when they're necessary.
In terms of collecting the monies, no, the VECs are not going to be involved with collecting the money. They'll, of course, continue to collect fees for doing exams.
Right.
But this $35 charge is separate from that. So the FCC will have to put in place some form of electronic, I don't know, PayPal type of setup, since they want everything done electronically, I'm assuming.
Thank you.
This is Marty, N1VH. I had a question for each of you. The first one to Tom, maybe I missed it, but how is your staff signed? Are they appointed, or what differentiates that role from the volunteers? And then Phil, to a little different than Pi's question, the Logbook of the World. What is being done to facilitate growth in the DX community? Mailing a postcard is not something that's easily done for them to get that process completed. How is that being done?
I don't understand your question for me, Marty. Could you try it again?
Sure. For the Logbook of the World in the DX community, meaning non-US AARL, what are we doing to promote growth in that community and facilitating the getting the process done when you got to get a postcard with a password on it?
Oh,
it can't be done. And I know a lot of us get frustrated because we're getting a lot of DX through either FTAs or some of these contests, and we're reaching a lot of people who just have either aren't aware of, can't, or won't use Logbook of the World.
Tom, you want to take that one too? You're more familiar with LOTW than I am, actually.
Okay. 1 second. All right, good. I just want to make sure I was not on mute. Yeah, I guess, I don't really know. I think the question was, the first question about LOTW was about the postcard and whether or not that could be done. I was looking at something else. I just want to make sure I answer the right question.
How to better promote LOTW among DX stations.
Oh, I see. Yes. Well, again, I'm not an LOTW expert. I'm a very avid user, though. But I do know that the problem has been for years was the stringent requirements that they have for certification of the user. It's much easier, I guess, with the U.S. hams, but I not being a DXer, also I don't know the hoops they go through, but it has been a problem that there are far fewer, I guess, DX people, or at least the process is harder if you're outside the USA. I mean, that's basically all I know, because I don't know the inner workings of it and why.
Can I throw something in there, Tom? Because
yeah, please do.
I have had a number of heated discussions with some of the people at ARRL over the years, whether it was at Dayton or at headquarters. And the last thing that I had come up with as my, I don't know if it was an original thought or not, but the whole thing about getting once people do it, now you use Logbook of the World, I use Logbook of the World. It's once you've registered and gone through whatever hoops you have to jump through, you completely forget about it. It's invisible. It sits behind that wall, and you don't. And then if somebody a year later asks you, "Hey, can you help me do it?" You you don't know what to do. You got to look it up. So my suggestion was to actually, if they want to get this thing really rolling, and maybe if they wanted to partner it with the thing that I had just suggested about uploading all of the logs from all the contests, which are valid logs. I mean, you do all of the checking and everything, is to have a concierge, an actual, and it could be something that you could have. I don't care how you instituted something like this, whether you started it with some sort of a volunteer group or something like that. But like when you have a software problem with your computer, you actually go through somebody that's wherever the heck they are in the world, and they can, you give them permission, they take over your computer and they fix whatever's wrong and they get it running. Well, that's exactly what needs to be done here with Logbook of the World. It's probably less than 10 minutes from start to finish for somebody that knows what they're doing. If you just go sit there with your hands back and let somebody else take over your computer and set it all up, and they say, okay, you're ready to go. And that, I mean, why not make it as simple as something like that?
A couple of quick comments on that. First of all, I like your idea of, the being able to upload the contest logs. I think, though, that one of the issues they would have to work out there, of course, is I think it might be more than just saying, okay, put this on LOTW, because the station would obviously need to also be a registered LOTW user. And so some of the issues with why the registration is so much harder for DX people than for US.
I'm thinking of a way of circumventing that so that you could actually have them, like maybe with their logs are going to go up there. They would see that they have all these confirmations. They have DXCC and everything else on 5 bands, even if they haven't registered. But through all their contest operations, now they have an incentive to go through the rest of the registration process.
I'm thinking another thing here might be to invite someone from the ARRL DX Advisory Committee as a speaker sometime, and just talk about some of these LOTW issues. They would probably be far better off positioned than either Phil or I, since we're not intimately involved in the actual nuts and bolts of it.
Oh, yeah, I'm not trying to beat up on you guys, but I'll put something together and I'll send it to Dave, NA2AA. And by the way, I have to give my thumbs up to the league for putting him in that position, because he's the first director that I've actually that shows up in my logbook, and I've worked him on CW, sideband, FT4, and FT8. So to me, you're talking about somebody that's an active ham.
Well, that's probably because K1USN isn't in your current digital logbook, but he was.
By the way,
I know that. I know, yeah.
David does actively solicit input on all kinds of things, like what you're bringing up, Pi, sent to either his address at ARRL.org or CEO at ARRL.org. And
I think
you'll probably get a response. Yeah. You'll probably get a personal response from him.
Yeah, I think David is going to be very responsive, and I personally think that the editorials have improved in QST every month since he's been the CEO. There was a second part of the question, and that was I had it in my mind, and then it just there was a question about the staff. How come I have 10 staff, and who's on the staff versus a volunteer position, if I recall correctly. So the issue there is the ARRL has a number of what they call field organization. Well, part of the field organization is they have specific positions. There is the SEC, Section Emergency Coordinator, the STM, Section Traffic Manager, and ASM, Assistant Section Managers, and I have 5 of them. Believe it or not, Phil is one, and even though he's our Vice Director, he remains an Assistant Section Manager here just because he has so much incredible ARRL knowledge. He's a great advisor. Bruce Blaine, K1BG, is both the ACC and an ASM. There are a couple of other ASMs, K1IR, many of you may know. So those are the staff positions that report directly to the section manager. In addition, there's a technical coordinator who reports to the section manager. That's Dan Brown, that I mentioned earlier. Write to him if you need help with technical issues. There's a public information coordinator. That's the publicity group. And then clubs can appoint what they call a public information officer. So the PIC is also a staff position on the section manager. There's the state government liaison. There's the section youth coordinator. And did I miss any, Phil? I think that's most of them. Those high-level roles report to the section manager. The section manager then can delegate or keep control if he or she wants, of the field appointments themselves. Like in the MCOM world, you have a district emergency coordinator, you have an assistant district emergency coordinator, you have an EC. I like to have those people report directly to the section emergency coordinator. So if you go to the actually go to ema.arrl.org, click on any, I think somewhere there's a link to the section manager leadership positions.
And it's called leadership in the menu.
Yeah, it's called leadership. On that EMA website, you'll see the 10, not 10 because I have 5 assistant section managers, but you'll see the various positions that I just mentioned. Then there's the field organization that reports to those people. So if you want to become involved in traffic handling, you can get an official relay station or a net manager appointment. The other question was, were these appointed? Those high-level staff positions are appointed by the section manager. I defer to both my section traffic manager, Marcia, to appoint anyone who does traffic handling. I also empower Rob Macedo, the SEC, to make the appointments for any emergency communications people. And most of the others I make for the other staff members. So they are appointed. The section manager is the only one who is elected. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, good.
By the way, when you talked about those positions, the technical coordinator that you mentioned, and I envisioned that you have a question about something to do with radios or antennas or whatever, but has that in any of the sections, and I'm asking this question throughout the United States, I'm kind of wondering about the structure. Is that an area where if you had someone that was an expert in Logbook of the World, that they could be the go-to person on a section basis, that you could feed people to them? Or a second part of that is this, a lot of us use various software programs, and once we're using them, we think we love them and everything else, but sometimes we don't have a very good way of explaining to people how to use them. Is that something that's done in any of the sections, that with the technical coordinator, that he actually has someone in a volunteer position that would help people, say, set up Ham Radio Deluxe, or I know you have paid people that do that if you buy a software like that, but something like N1MM or something like that, is that even something conceivable to do?
That's really interesting. I think that there would be no restriction for Dan, for instance, to have what he calls a technical specialist who is an expert in software. Many of us, if you're a Linux person, many people probably know about KB1 OIQ. Andy Stewart from the part of Westford Club. He's kind of one of the local gurus, if you will, for Linux, but he's not on the TS technical specialist staff. So I don't see any reason why that couldn't be done. The idea of having an LOTW guru. However, there could be another thing that we're discussing is the need. I would like to actually see some changes made to the field organization. I would like to see appointments for mentoring, for instance. We've been talking a lot about why not appoint mentors. Right now, I don't have a mentor position. I could make a mentor someone who wants to mentor people on any particular topic, such as you mentioned, setting up software or building antennas or things. That might fit in the technical specialist area. But other kinds of things, operations and things, I'd like to see a mentor. position, endorsed. Take note, Phil. Yeah, I think
Tom,
Phil
could I
has a
just
comment.
interject?
Yeah, please do.
And I forgot to mention this during my talk. Pi, these are great ideas. I've been appointed to what they're calling a field organization working group. So far, it's quite small. It's David Minster, myself, another vice director, and one other section manager. And the goal of this working group, I think, is to kick ideas around like this and eventually make improvements to the field organization. So I'm very happy that you mentioned this evening, and I would love to hear other ideas that you have too.
One more comment. One thing I have noticed in other sections is that because there isn't a field position for everything that we've discussed here tonight, a lot of section managers, myself included, are making a greater use of this assistant section manager role. You might have an assistant section manager for, some specific purpose, and you can set that, you can give them a work assignment or a job description, really, on almost anything that's relevant to the hobby. So I notice some sections now have almost all section managers, assistant section managers, and very few of the actual field appointments themselves. So that's a way around it until Phil's committee maybe comes up with a revitalized organization for field. Okay. Questions? More questions?
Anybody else have any questions here for these guys while we got them on the hook?
I have one, if you guys don't mind.
Right.
In the beginning, you guys, somebody mentioned that you're going to bring the publications into the digital age. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. I was thinking specifically of On the Air, where they've introduced this podcast that accompanies it. I know also that David Minster is very keen on promoting ARRL and the hobby through podcasts. He's gone out of his way to reach out to people who create content via podcasts to have them put in plugs for the ARRL and its programs. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about, and bring some of our other publications more into the digital realm.
I think that's actually, podcasts are great, I think, for especially when some of the scouts that you work with, be great extra opportunity to get them further interested.
A lot of newer hams these days are getting a lot of their information through podcasts. It's surprising. It's hard for some of us old timers to really wrap our heads around that mode, but they're becoming quite popular.
No, I think that's a great avenue to head down. I just caution with the demographics putting the magazine into digital form and not in print.
Oh no, they're not going to cease print publication, but they want to augment it with more digital.
That's a sound approach.
Yeah.
Good.
Henry?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Henry.
Okay, one more question here, Phil, before you guys leave. I think you and I had talked about a year ago about the possibility of the ARRL website being revised and brought up to. Is that in the works?
Still very much on the burners. Still being talked about. I have not heard an update recently. Thank you for jogging my memory. I'm going to make an inquiry because I too am very curious to know.
They're still using DOS.
It's, they'd be better off, in my opinion, just scrapping the whole damn thing and implementing it in WordPress. They've got some sort of, well, I'll shut up before I say something I shouldn't.
Yeah, if you
You're being recorded. Remember, you're being recorded.
I know.
If you talk too much, Phil, they're going to have you do it. Pi, before we go, I've got just a couple of things. First of all, how many ARRL members do we have here tonight? Just raise your hand so I can see most of you. That's really a pretty good showing. It's most everyone here. a little bit of trivia to kind of end things. Does anyone here know how old Hiram Percy Maxim was when he passed away, and what he died from? How he died?
I'm going to just guess 73.
Oh my word.
That's kind of interesting.
I bet he died of lung cancer or something like that.
Throat or some kind of an infection?
Hiram Percy Maxim died at 66 years old of a throat infection.
Wow.
He was coming back from California. He was also an astronomer, and I guess he was pursuing some astronomy interest. And he was on a train coming back, and they took him off in Colorado, and he died the next day. Given that I look here and I see a number of people such as myself who are actually older than 66, having just been jabbed for the second time, sometimes we forget about how incredibly lucky we are to have grown up and lived in this time frame when things like sore throats were no longer a problem. So we're rounding the bend here now, and I look forward to seeing all you guys again real soon. So
Well,
that's it for me.
thank you, Bruce. Thanks. And yeah, I didn't realize that he had passed away at age 66. I think Hamley Way would have been, if he had been trying to string an antenna off that train and fell off the train or something like that.
He looks far older than that in his photo.
Oh, and before we go, let me put in one more promo. Feel free, go to the EMA website or the New England Division website. Feel free, contact any of the people listed there. By all means, reach out to Bruce, or if you want to bounce around ideas on clubs, Pi, for instance, I know Bruce would be more than happy to engage. As I say, there's a whole lot of help out there that may not be as well known. If you have interest in the emergency communications area or the traffic handling, or want to be a technical specialist and help Dan Brown, all of these people are waiting to hear from you. So please reach out to them, and by all means, let Phil and let Fred know anything you think ARRL needs to work on as a policy matter.
It's interesting, when you were giving a list of some of the people that were involved there in the section. We've had Rob do a presentation here. We had Marsha do a presentation. So we've already been tapping into the resources that you have, and I try to spread the word around. But I think it's something that you can't say enough to let people know. And about the magazines, I love getting a paper copy of QST every month. But I try to read all of the other ones in the digital mode there, and I love the contest journal, and this new on the air one is it's super, and so there's a lot of great stuff. And if you're an ARRL member, all of that stuff's available to you. I get most. I don't get every single one, but I get most of the email newsletters that come from the league too. They come on a weekly basis usually, and a lot of great stuff there, a lot of great resources.
I have a question. It's Mike WA1MAD. Thank you for being here with us tonight. This is something that comes up frequently since the 1930s, when Gone with the Wind, and somebody said, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn," and everybody was all upset about the word damn being put in the movie, to today, where damn wouldn't be even thought about based on the language. The language on ham radio, and I've been asked the question a number of times, because people will be listening on certain frequencies, and I hate to make the reference, it's like CB, the day of CB, where the language and the conversation is embarrassing. And probably for people who value their license, they wouldn't do it because we know better. But there's a lot of people out there, and it's not policed. As near as I can tell, it's just accepted and tolerated, and the answer is just change of frequency, stop listening. And it's not policed. Is there anything, has that ever been a conversation that's come up about what to do?
I don't know to what extent Riley Hollingsworth and his team are looking into these issues. But I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just terrible, very disrespectful. It goes on every night on 75. I guess I would encourage you to.
I don't hear it on CW, but go ahead.
I would strongly encourage you to, when you come across the band and hear this, take note of the frequency, the call signs, if they're even identifying, and report that to Riley, or report that to the folks and see if something happens. I just don't know, Tom.
Do you have the address to the email address for the volunteer monitoring hand?
Yeah, let me throw it up in the chat.
And while you look at that, let me add, I too hear it. There are certain frequencies that you hear it a lot on. There's one in particular on 40, and sometimes you just hear it in passing on conversations all over 75. I vaguely recall, I don't think it was Riley, but I vaguely recall someone in years past saying that the FCC, which we would like to see stronger enforcement, kind of puts, bad language in a lower priority. I don't know if that's still how it is today, but they seem to want to focus on interference issues. But yes, I agree. I think it's troubling that you hear it. We're trying to get kids involved. Need I say more?
I put up those addresses in the chat just now for Riley and for Dan Henderson.
And if you're not on chat, I see K4ZDH@ARRL.org. Zulu Delta Hotel, K4 Zulu Delta Hotel.
So you were going to both send us your PowerPoint presentation so we can have that link up there. And if there's any specific addresses like that, we can add them to the write-up too.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to thank you, Pi, and everyone involved in the club. Let me end by saying I love the SST. I don't get on it enough, but I sure do enjoy it when I do.
It's one of these things. It's kind of taken on a life of its own here, and it's almost like, well, why did this have to wait so long to start up? But anyways, now that it's here, it seems like it's really growing in leaps and bounds. We're really happy with it.
Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant.
Anyone else have any questions for these guys? I mean, they're probably going to need to take a nap here now before bedtime. Really delighted that you were able to spend the time here with us tonight. And I think I've been an ARRL member since 1962. So I don't know. I mean, it's and I'm a lifelong supporter. I'm not a life member. I didn't get in on that train early enough, but I've been a member for all my ham career, and I recommend it for everybody. Thanks everybody for checking in here tonight and giving our ARRL representatives here a chance to let you know a little bit about what they do. So now it's up to you to show them your support by going to the webpage, check things out, and maybe if you have some skills that you'd like to share or some thoughts, there's a couple of email addresses here. What's great about these guys is their email address is their call sign at ARRL.org, and you can get right through to them. So it's pretty easy to remember that.